Love that. I love that. And I really appreciate the time ahead of game one of the NBA Finals tonight. I actually, before we talk about the Knicks and the Spurs and take a trip back in time to the NBA on NBC and all that good stuff, I'd love for you to promote what you've got coming up less than a week from now, along with Steve Stone with the Chicago White Sox. I was reading about it this morning. I thought it was really great, and I'd love for you to tell the audience about it so they can check it out.
Well, NBC did a throwback NBA game in February. They've done a few callbacks to the great feeling that surrounds the NBA on NBC in the 90s, and that's part of the reason why I'm there for occasional cameos, kind of a bridge for both baseball, which NBC last had in 2000, and the NBA, which they last had in 2002. So they brought back as many of the announcers and commentators as possible to this game in Philadelphia. And some people with the White Sox saw the game, were enamored with the idea, and thought maybe we can do a throwback game involving the White Sox. So that game is going to be Tuesday against the Braves, and the focus is going to be on the 80s. In 1983, the White Sox won the division by some 20 games and nearly beat the Orioles in the LCS. There was no wild cards then. The division winners met. The LCS was best of 5, and the White Sox wound up losing in 4. But Game 4 was a 1-0 game in 10 innings where Britt Burns pitched a masterpiece and had his heart broken on a Tito Landrum home run in the 10th. My connection to all this is that the 50th anniversary All-Star game was at Comiskey Park, and I hosted it for NBC, and the great Vin Scully and Joe Garagiola called it. And then later that season in October, Tony Kubek and I called that LCS. So that's the jumping off point. But the broadcast, which will not ignore the game that's going on the field, but the broadcast will have a bunch of callbacks to stuff in the 80s, including Steve Stone winning the Cy Young Award at the beginning of the decade with the Orioles in 1980, and some of the other big moments in baseball. And I suggested to them to note the fact that there were a number of memorable baseball movies that were released in the 1980s. And, of course, you'll hear some of the music that people of a certain age will recognize from that era. And I guess some of the graphics and whatnot will be closer to what they were in the 80s than now. Just a one-off throwback game.
Please forgive this question, but as you're going
all right,
through
I've
all
already
of that...
forgiven you.
Well, let me ask the question first, and then we'll see if you forgive it.
Okay.
Okay. I'm guessing the answer is yes, but I'll let you answer the question, obviously. I'm guessing you have moments, or maybe not, where you think about the life that you've led and continue to lead, and the career that you've had, where you're able to say, hey, I did this, and Vin Scully and Joe Garagiola were on the call. I grew up, you were one of the voices of my childhood. I turned 43 on Saturday. Do you have moments where you just think to yourself, man, what a life and career this has been and how cool it all is?
Yeah, now and then, not all the time. But on the other hand, I'm continually reminded of it. When people ask me to be on a show like this, or something crops up and it reminds people, or there's a comparison to what Michael Jordan did in this circumstance, or George Brett did in a postseason, and then I hear myself. I'm watching the thing, and then I hear myself on the call. During COVID, when there were no live games to broadcast, all the various networks dug into the archives, and they'd replay classic games. So Al Michaels calls me one day, and he says, I'm on 3 networks at once. Because he had a football game over here and a baseball game from the 80s over there. And I had that same experience during COVID, where I heard not just highlights, but entire games that I remember doing, but I certainly didn't remember all the particulars or all the things that I said. But that was during a unique period of time when no one was going anywhere, so you had nothing else to do.
What's your favorite game or event that you've ever been a part of, called, announced, etc.?
I really can't single out any one, but when I'm asked, I have 3 that I immediately just toss out there. I didn't call Kirk Gibson's home run, the pinch hit home run in Game 1 of 1988's World Series off Dennis Eckersley. Jack Buck had a memorable call on radio, and Vin Scully had one of his greatest calls on television. But I was the pregame and postgame host for NBC, and that remains the most theatrical baseball moment I've ever been connected to. Not necessarily the biggest or the best, but the most theatrical in the way it played out. And I interviewed Gibson immediately on the field in the aftermath of this miraculous home run. And I actually said that this reminded me of Roy Hobbs at bat, Robert Redford as Roy Hobbs in the movie The Natural, which was fairly new at that time during the 1980s. And what NBC's producers did, and it was brilliant, was they went to work and they intercut Redford's at bat with Gibson's at bat, along with Randy Newman's soundtrack from The Natural. And that's the way we came on the air before Game 2, because it was that dramatic and that theatrical in the way the whole thing played out. You couldn't have staged it any more dramatically than that. So that's one. Another is Muhammad Ali lighting the torch at the opening ceremony of the Olympics in Atlanta in 1996, a moment both powerful and poignant. And the third would be Michael Jordan's last shot as a Chicago Bull. We thought at the time it was perhaps his last shot of the NBA, but he did come back for a couple of seasons with the Wizards. But essentially, that's the way the curtain came down. And talk about theatrical, one of the greatest careers in the history of American sports ends in the most dramatic way possible. Classic jump shot, down by a point, changes it to up by a point, closes out the series, closes out his career, 6 titles, 6 MVPs in the finals, never lost in the finals. That's a perfect punctuation.
May have pushed off, but I'm a lifelong Knicks fan, and Michael Jordan ruined my childhood saying that.
Stop. If that play happens in the second quarter of a regular season game, no one even comments on it. Russell's momentum was already carrying him in the other direction. The little hand on his tush, as I said in the Last Dance documentary, was the equivalent of a maitre d' showing a customer to his table. It had nothing to do with the play. He had already faked him out of position and was wide open and then hit the shot.
I hated them. I can't. Well, unless the Knicks win a championship, I can't shake it. I'm being honest up front about my hate for them. You've mentioned the name Vin Scully a couple times, and I'm a Fordham guy, so I know the greatness of Vin Scully, his legendary career. Now, I ask you this question, Bob. This is not to mean that someone you don't say is not great. It's not to be like someone's better than the other and someone's not as good. But I'm genuinely curious, given your stature and what you've been able to accomplish, what you've done in your career, when you watch sports on television now, who is your favorite play-by-play broadcaster and why?
Again, it's very difficult to pick a single favorite. There are a number of really good young baseball announcers. You're a Fordham guy. I'm a Syracuse guy. And while there are a lot of fine broadcasters from Fordham, we've got you outnumbered. Kevin Brown, the young announcer for the Orioles, who's done some postseason stuff, he's really good. Jason Benetti is knocking it out of the park. Weak metaphor there. Sorry for that. But he's knocking it out of the park in everything he does, including Sunday Night Baseball on NBC. Mike Tirico is, I guess, a latter-day version of Al Michaels and of me. The comparison to me is that he can both host and do play-by-play, which I did for much of my career, and he's been excellent in everything he's done. Every time I hear Ian Eagle call a football game or a basketball game, I'm very impressed. Joe Buck, social media got on Joe Buck for a long time. Stop it. 24 World Series, all the Super Bowls and stuff. Objectively, he's one of the best play-by-play men in network television history. But with all the great ones, there are always differences in style and approach. And so there's not an objective criteria. There's no OPS or scoring average or anything that you can objectively apply. So people are going to have their preferences, but everybody I just mentioned and a few others are absolutely excellent.
I always say, Bob, when people come on the show and they are not on social media, that they are the smartest people in the room. So ergo, you're the smartest person on this interview right now. So I don't know if you're aware of this because you aren't on social media, but your voiceover to the beginning of the 1999 NBA Finals with the Knicks and the Spurs has been texted to me like 100 times this week by friends of mine that are Knicks fans.
I didn't know that.
It's gone viral because, of course, the Knicks are playing the Spurs, and it's great, and the NBA on NBC, and all of that. Now, you were the voice of so many of these New York moments in the 90s, which unfortunately for me as a Knicks fan didn't always end the way I wanted, but they were great moments, called in great fashion by you and others. So now that we stand on the precipice of the New York Knicks back in the NBA Finals, and I'm guessing you think about those times the same way I do, what emotions, if any, does that fill you with today?
Well, I'm happy that I was part of the NBA on NBC. It was a glorious era. The league gave us a great canvas to work with, and I think we at NBC, all of us, producers, directors, broadcasters, hosts, analysts, play-by-play people, I think we all took what we were handed and elevated it. The way we framed and presented that legitimate drama, I think took it up a notch. So it was a wonderful partnership, and I was lucky to be part of it. The 99 finals were not an epic finals, and I don't think anybody expected them to be. The Knicks had come from an 8 seed to somehow make it to the finals. They were without Patrick Ewing, who watched it all in street clothes from the bench. Meanwhile, here come the Spurs, who had blitzed through the Western Conference, might have lost one game during all the conference playoffs, and they've got Tim Duncan and David Robinson. So all of us pretty much expected, you always hope that the thing will go 7 because it's just better for drama and for ratings and everything else. But my expectation was that the Spurs would make pretty quick work of the Knicks, which they did. Allen Houston had a big game in Game 3, the first game at Madison Square Garden. The Knicks won that, but then the Spurs wound up winning the series in 5. I think as we look at this series, if when the playoffs started, somebody said the Knicks are going to meet the Spurs in the final, I think the overwhelming consensus would be that the Spurs would be a prohibitive favorite. They are still a solid favorite, but based on the way the Knicks played to get through the Eastern Conference, more people give them a chance to at least make it competitive than would have a month ago.
Do you think here, and maybe this could be the final question, Bob, and you've been exceptionally generous with your time, and you called a lot of tremendous moments that Michael Jordan had, right? And no one, I think, is going to say, if they're being honest, that Victor Wembanyama is going to be better than Michael. It's a crazy thing to say, right? But I think we can acknowledge, or maybe you disagree, and that's fine, right? That it's within the range of outcomes, given his age, his size, what he's already accomplished, that it might not be nuts to suggest that he could maybe breathe that rarefied air at some point and sit in the pantheon of greats, maybe along with Michael.
Yeah.
As someone who called these games with MJ, what do you think about that? Yeah, please.
He can put his name in the conversation, but I've always said that when it comes to basketball, centers, even as they differ, Russell's not the same as Wilt, who's not the same as Olajuwon, not the same as a healthy Walton, and on, Kareem, obviously. Even as they differ, centers should be separate from guards and forwards. It's like comparing goalies in hockey to forward centers or defensemen. It's kind of a separate category. But the thing with Wemby is, he's hard to categorize. He's obviously not just a classic post player. Those hardly exist anymore. He is, the word unique is often overused when people really mean rare, but he is a unique player. The combination of skills, the body control, the size, the whole thing. I mean, they tell me he's 7'5". They list him at 7'4" for whatever reason. None of the all-time greats that I mentioned were as tall as Wemby. Most of them were more sturdy than Wemby appears to be, but he's only 22. He may fill out further, but he may not want to, because part of his approach, the body control and the way he prepares himself, meditation, you notice when he goes to the free throw line, he closes his eyes before the shot, the whole way in which he approaches maximizing his body for the tasks of basketball is new age. It's 21st century. Makes some of these comparisons difficult, but certainly he has a chance. Bottom line, he has a chance to be in the conversation of the all-time greats, if he isn't there already.
In closing, Bob, may I ask a brief favor, and then we will get you out of here. And again, thank you very much for the time, but may I ask you a brief favor? So we have an open that plays in the second hour of our show every day that features some broadcasting luminaries. Like you mentioned Joe Buck earlier. He's one of them. Kevin Harlan's one of them. Basically doing like a brief intro to the show, and we put like a nice open together.